So a number of us here remember the last time we had this kind of a crisis at the border when President Obama was in office in 2013 and 2014. And we saw some similar situations where ports of entry were overwhelmed and CBP and ICE were overwhelmed with the number of people coming in. And yet there was a response to that that ultimately resulted in a decrease in people coming across the border and families coming across the border. Do any of you want to speak to what the changes were that reduced the pressure at that time on the border?
Yes, I'd like to do that, please. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the immediate response, I think, of the Obama administration was in some ways parallel. They opened processing center of Ursula that we still see today, and they increased dramatically the use of family detention. But that really shifted, I think, both because of the Flores litigation that found that that was illegal, a court case, IRLR, that found that deterrence, the use of detention for deterrence purposes of families was unconstitutional, and just seeing that it wasn't working, right? That you can't deter a family from seeking protection. And so they really changed course. We worked a lot with them on this, and I think they developed many policies that really helped turn things around. They invested in human rights programs in Central America. That's a long-term solution, obviously, but it was starting to show effect. They created a processing program overseas so that children, called the Central American Minors Program, so that children in Central America who were in danger and had relatives in the United States could apply from Central America to come in a safe, legal manner. So it created a sort of escape valve, so to speak. And they created the Family Case Management Program that got families out of family detention, away from the border, and into community management, case management programs that worked.
So the bottom line is these policies aren't working, and it's time we try something else.
Absolutely. And I think the other interesting fact here is that since the administration has been implementing these incredibly harsh punitive policies, what have we seen? We've seen more chaos at the border and more supposed numbers.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Shaheen, could I just share one story? It has to do with this. It has to do with deterrence. I met a woman in a family facility who had a 4-year-old child, and the child had no affect at all and had bandages around her arm. The teenage brother back in Honduras had been recruited by a neighborhood gang. Mom had said no. They abducted the child from school and burned both her wrists. Mom picked her up and ran for the United States like that, didn't do anything. They got to the border, and she heard that children were being separated. This is last year. And she said to me, you know, I had no choice. I came across with my baby going to be taken away from me, and all I could do was pray that she would wind up somewhere good. I could not take her back to death. So you can't deter people who have that Hobson's choice. You can't do it.
Yeah. I will add to that I interviewed parents at Port Isabel last summer who'd had their children taken away from them for the Dora v. Sessions litigation. And the stories from those parents were so terrible. And I've been working in trauma. I worked in South Sudan. I have never sat with suffering like the suffering of those parents. I kept going through interpreters because they couldn't bear what they were listening to. And you listen to those parents and their devotion to their children and what they sacrificed to bring them. And indeed, whether it was domestic violence or it was gang-related, the choice was death for them. And there absolutely was no choice. The other thing, which has been brought up before, is that I sat across from these parents, one after another. It was so painful, particularly feeling that this was my country that was doing this to them. And more than that, I looked at them and thought, this agony that I am seeing, this is why this policy is in place. This is not a byproduct of this policy. This is not a side effect of this policy. This suffering is the purpose of this policy. And this sadism, I think, poisons us all. I really do. I think it poisons, as Hope has mentioned, the Border Patrol guards, the people who work in ORR facilities. I think the concentric circles of suffering and damage from having these sorts of policies inflicted on human beings, children, parents, really infects us all.
Thank you. Thank you all.